Hey, it's Jordan with TYT and TYT Network, and today I have the senior justice writer for the New York Daily News, Shaun King. He's written a lot about the election. He's come out in support of Senator Sanders. He's obviously working at the New York Daily News, who just came out in support of Secretary Clinton. I'll start with that elephant in the room. The Young Turks was a little critical of the Daily News. Their interview with Senator Sanders. I read both transcripts, Senator Sanders versus Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton. I will say, obviously don't expect you to bite the hand that feeds you, but it did seem a little bit more aggressive towards Sanders than Secretary Clinton. In terms of Senator Sanders, he did have some slip-ups at some points. I think the media kind of overblew the whole situation.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see it as biting the hand that feeds me either. I was telling you before we started, the Daily News has really given me a lot of freedom to say what I think and to give my honest kind of take and perspective on not just the Bernie Sanders campaign, but a wide variety of issues on injustice, police brutality. Like, for instance, our paper traditionally has been the most read paper in New York by police officers. We're kind of seen in the city as a working class paper for public servants and others. But I'm very critical of not just police brutality, but police misconduct, the way police handle misconduct. I'm critical about corruption of public servants and people in power. And so they've given me kind of freedom to do that. And when I got the transcript, I liked it. I liked what Bernie said. I don't present myself as unbiased. Like, I'm extremely biased. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, but I'm also very willing to be critical of him and any of his stances. But man, when I read the transcript, and then when I listened to the audio, I dug most of what I heard. I understood what people were saying about, like, hey, how he said he would break up big banks. We didn't like his tone, or we didn't fully understand his answer. Like, I got that, but it actually made sense to me. And Robert Reich, who was President Bill Clinton's labor secretary, actually came out the day the transcript was released and said, no, actually, Bernie was right with what he said about how big banks could be broken up. And there's a kind of a fundamental misunderstanding here about who has the power to do that. Mm-hmm. Not that Bernie was wrong, but that Bernie, according to Robert Reich, was actually right, that the president has the power. And Bernie even said, and I went back, I just wrote a piece today, my rebuttal of the Daily News endorsement of Hillary Clinton. And so it just came out a few minutes ago.
Wow, they do give you a lot of freedom.
Yeah. So I wrote a very thorough critique of it. And it just came out. And in Bernie's interview with the editorial board, he said, no, if I'm president, I would consult the Treasury and the Fed. I would consult people. I'm not going to tell you right now, here's exactly how I would break up JP Morgan Chase, or here's exactly how I would break up XYZ. I would consult people and we'd think through it, and, it would be a complicated process. But I was flabbergasted at the notion, and I say this in my piece, that people were making it out like he had no idea what he was talking about.
Right.
Like, he lives and breathes these issues and has done so for over 30 years. It was a short interview. It was a 45-minute interview where I think he had a ton of ground he wanted to cover. And see, I say that with, like, compassionate ears. Like, I heard the interview and was like, yeah, he kind of rushed through that. Mm-hmm. Like, had he known that he was going to get killed on it, on the back end, he would have, he'd have spent the whole interview unpacking, you do this and do that. He's known for being a guy that is into the minutia, right, into the details. But I think he I think he had so much he wanted to say that he blew past it.
The Daily News itself confused some things. You know, they were mentioning that the Federal Reserve plays a part in breaking up the big banks when it's really the Treasury Department. There were a few other things that the question here wasn't exactly accurate on. But
That's true.
I think once the media, particularly TV news, latches on to a meme, which is, you know, Bernie Sanders, he blew it. It kind of sparks from there into a bigger thing.
I think that's exactly, Jordan. I think that's exactly what happened. Is that when the mainstream media and the Hillary Clinton campaign decided, oh wow, he royally screwed up here. This is terrible. Most people didn't actually read the transcript or didn't actually see what was terrible, and they just assumed it was true. Like, oh man, he doesn't even know how he's going to break up these big banks. I think what we're dealing with, because our editorial board is full of really smart, seasoned journalists, but I think when you talk about something that really has never been done before in our lifetime, that it's a new conversation, and I think it showed, and I do find it. I thought they asked smart questions, like, and I said in my the day the interview came out, I was frustrated, and I said though, like, Bernie Sanders should be asked tough questions.
Right.
Hell, he's won 15 states. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz, John K. All of them should be thrown fastballs, curveballs. I mean, they should all have the kitchen sink thrown at them. So I'm not bothered by hard. Bernie should have to answer hard questions. And I think he should come back and say, hey, since people are not clear, let me unpack that a little more.
Right.
And like I felt like he did flub his answer about what he would do if victims of Sandy Hook wanted to sue gun manufacturers. Now, he has been very consistent. I disagree with his stance on that. I wish that people did have the option to sue these gun manufacturers. But where he messed up is, in kind of typical Bernie fashion, he just came off as short and curt. Mm-hmm. And I know that he has a huge heart for victims of violence. I know that. And I've seen him talk about it at great length. But that didn't come off in that interview. And it bothered some of the families, actually. And even some of our editorial, you know, people in our newsroom were personally affected by Sandy Hook. Mm-hmm. And it's a personal issue there. And they just felt like, damn, he didn't really deal with it with a lot of sensitivity, you know?
Well, that's a good segue, actually, because I wanted to ask you about the coverage of Hillary Clinton in turn. Because it's not just focusing on the Daily News, because there's plenty of outlets who I see, and the Young Turks has seen, you know, kind of are very aggressive on Sanders, but when it comes to Hillary Clinton, they kind of let her obfuscate a little bit. So, for an example, I read the whole transcript of the Daily News interview with Secretary Clinton. You know, I definitely lean towards Sanders too, but I too am I'm more interested in the truth. Secretary Clinton in 2008 was toting stories about how she went out hunting with her father and shooting when she was a kid. She was talking a lot closer to the NRA on guns than she is now. But more importantly, to the now, you know, she's really trying to differentiate herself against Senator Sanders on this gun issue. But at the same time, in March, her campaign held a fundraiser with a lobbyist for the NRA. He was a lobbyist from 2009 to 2015. I've been tweeting about this. You don't see cable news talk about that. You didn't see the Daily News questioner about, well, you're saying this on one hand, but this is who you're associating and taking money with. Do you think it's an issue of that corporate media and veteran journalists that you were mentioning at the Daily News and elsewhere, they've kind of been in this game for so long and they're kind of just used to that politics as usual, where a candidate says one thing, goes after a certain special interest on one hand, but in turn takes their money on the other hand? So it's not seen as something that really you need to challenge that person on?
I think I'll say two I see what you see. Okay, and I think
because I should finish that this is really the defining issue for the Sanders movement. This revolving door between lobbyists, banks, corporations, but in the media, even in stories about Secretary Clinton attacking Senator Sanders, there's no mention of the money she's taking. There's no mention of her position evolving.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Like, so the day after we released our transcripts, we ran at the Daily News, we ran a cover story on Hillary Clinton and all the money that she's taken from Goldman Sachs and how she still refuses to release the transcripts. Like, the Daily News typically has been, if we like did averages here, we've run more harsh stories critiquing her, including probably 10 that I've written myself, but even beyond me. I mean, cover stories like crushing her, particularly on the corporate influence of, and that's a very relevant New York story, in particular, because even the Daily News is literally just a few blocks away from the actual Wall Street, and so it's big for the Daily News. But and the Daily News is, if you've seen it, is we're obsessed with the NRA. Like we've run a ton of stories blasting them and what their money has meant. I think there's still room. I think you're right. There's still room for the Daily News and certainly for corporate media in general to talk more about the NRA lobbyists, but just how money influences politics. And I think I hope that we are in the early days in our country of even like we are just scratching the surface of how money influences politics. Like we are, obviously it's a central pillar of the Sanders campaign. It's what's central to Democracy Spring and others. It has not crossed the fence yet. And I'm not convinced that mainstream media will ever fully cover that because they too often play a role.
Right.
And
I mean, I've been reporting, NBC, MSNBC, their parent company Comcast held a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton last year. And so how much can we expect MSNBC or NBC or any of their properties? It's almost like that's why the Young Turks exist. Like right. that's why we have this. Like, so I am this guy, like I am a Young Turk inside of New York Daily News, right?
In essence, and so I get a lot of freedom to talk about revolutionary thoughts and movements and struggles, but by and large, it's going to be independent media sources
right.
that drive this conversation. I talk about it a lot in my rebuttal of the Daily News endorsement of Hillary that I just can't. I don't care. For me, if Bernie completely flubbed his interview with the Daily News, I have to look at his body of work.
Right.
And I have to look at consistent principles over the course of his life. And I can't get over the differences as far as fundraising and corporate money goes. Like,
right.
I can't. No, he could have walked into that interview with his butt cheeks out and completely drunk, and I'd have been like, "Oh my God, that's terrible." But I forgive him, and now let me look at the body of his work. Mm-hmm. Like, there would be no way in the world that I would completely judge him based on that interview. Right. Like, it just, But even that said, I still like most of the interview. It's hard to be a revolutionary.
Frederick Douglass said it right. Freedom is never given to you. It has to be fought for.
Like I had a conversation with my wife. My wife and I went out to dinner last night, and even with me, as I work for the corporate media, I have to constantly, day in and day out, say, man, if I push it too hard here, am I gonna get in trouble? Am I gonna lose my job? Are they gonna get tired of me saying that I disagree? And so it's hard to, I speak to professional Americans. I'm 36, and I think you and I are probably a similar age, right? And how old are you?
I'm about to be 30.
So we're in the same generation, right? Where we're young professionals. Mm-hmm. We're doing what we want, but we're not quite fully where we want to go yet. And so we're in this position where we're thinking, like, life's still a little fragile for us.
Right.
And I talk to young professionals all the time who are worried that if they participate in a revolution, that they might lose their position. And by definition, that's what revolutions can do, cause you to be isolated.